dusk in Indianapolis, and Toby Brocker is returning home.
Well, I was driving back to my company from Zionsville, Indiana, and I hit a huge truck hole at 86th Street. Managed to blow two tires, two on the left side. Both tires were flat. And of course, you only carry one spare, so I was in a heap of trouble. It was very cold at night. It was just terrible weather.
I was coming from work, just where he was sitting with his two flat tires, the back road that I came out from work. He was right there across from me.
You need some help? You're looking pretty banged up there.
He was so kind and was going to let me put on my car his spare tire. Man, I didn't even know. And I was just marveled how this young man would stop and spend so much time with me. It was just remarkable, you know.
I'm all done, and you know, you can just bring me back my tire.
A few weeks later, Toby decided to show up at his newfound friend's place of business.
I just wanted to thank him. Again, I was impressed by this gentleman's spirit of wanting to help, and so I took a $20 bill and the Purpose Driven Life book over to him, and to give it to him there at the restaurant where he worked, and he came out and had a cup of coffee, and I asked him where he went to church, and he said he was a Muslim. I said, well, how did you become a Muslim? He says, well, I was in prison. I said, well, what were you in prison for? He says, armed robbery. And I was kind of taken aback because I'd never walked that way before.
I was in prison because I was living by the seat of my pants, and you know, growing up, I don't know how many times I heard, you know, you need some discipline, you need some structure, and Islam's got that. I mean, you know, they tell you the minimum number of times you need to pray, exactly what time of day, how to wash your hands.
As it turns out, embracing Islam was not Matthew's first exposure to God.
Mom tried to take us to church on Wednesday nights. We used to go to a church after school, more because it was kind of like a daycare situation as far as my father saw it, because he wouldn't get off work in time. We could walk straight over there after school.
Like so many other young people, Matthew made some bad decisions growing up, and the result was a prison term for armed robbery. Matthew was released from prison, and shortly thereafter, 9/11 hits. Turns out that horrific day was a game changer for him.
I realized that I wasn't rooted in Islam.
As I'd never dealt with anyone with Muslim faith before, but I think I did share my testimony with him at that time in inviting him to a breakfast that the Christian Businessmen's Committee were having. He did agree to come, for which I was very thankful, but I learned later on that Matthew actually wasn't really practicing the Muslim faith at that time. He told me he was still a Muslim to scare me off and make me go away.
Toby and Eldon Kibbe seemed to be very established gentlemen, you know, in the community, in the workforce, what have you. And I've heard all my life that you've got potential, you know, I see something in you, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, yeah, they're pitching Jesus to me, you know, they're trying to pull me in to, you know, check out their church, what have you. But at the same time, at that moment, I'm still like, well, you know, people that go to church seem to have money. You know, I don't have anything to put in the offering plate, but they do. Maybe they can help me get there, you know. And so I was still looking for the payoff.
2 months after that fateful night, Matthew and his wife Shiloh welcomed a baby boy into the world. And a couple of months later, Matthew disappeared from Toby's radar screen. Seems he found a new job 50 miles away in Kokomo.
My wife and I are driving through Kokomo, and I see the McAllister there, and I thought, oh, Matthew works there. I need to get up and see him. So a couple of days later, I take off about 2 o'clock in the afternoon to drive to Kokomo, and I thought, this is silly. You don't know whether he still works at that restaurant, and if he does, it may not be the hours he works, and what are you doing? But I went up and got there about 3 o'clock, and Matthew was there and greeted me very warmly and said, you know, it's amazing that you'd come because I normally leave at 2 o'clock, and here it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The fact that he was still there was a miracle in itself.
Toby and Matthew are reunited once more. But this time the topic turned from CBMC to his now 2-year-old son Spencer, who was suffering from kidney cancer. Seems Brocker's timing was once again perfect.
That's why I was so glad that Toby showed up out of the blue, you know. From what little I'd learned in life previously about God, you know, there was always that talk that God will comfort those who need it. And so when he said something about Operation Timothy, it was after I, you know, had made mention of trying to figure out how to straighten out my life. And he's like, well, this will help you understand who God is.
I had a good student. We had some great discussions, and along the way, I also gave him a disc by Ray Comfort on Hell's Best Kept Secret.
Hell's Best Kept Secret, the Bible, Operation Timothy, all of these things that he and a few others were giving me were great. I was driving home. I had barely left Kokomo, running through all this stuff in my mind. I'm feeling different, not better. And I'm in my own way. I hadn't invited Jesus in. Hell's Best Kept Secret talked about trying Jesus out just to see how it does for you in life versus really putting Jesus on, because I didn't make the conscious decision. You know, Jesus was standing on my front porch because I didn't say, hey, would you like to come in? I cried, I prayed, and I told Jesus, look, I'm sorry. I need you to come in here. I need you to straighten me out. Teach me from the inside. If you've never opened yourself to something, you'll never understand the feeling. But it's amplified a million times over when it's Jesus. You see through truly different eyes. You hear through different ears, smell through a different nose. And the world is totally different when you truly accept.
Matthew Tolbert found Jesus because Toby Brocker refused to leave his friend where he found him. When Matthew drove away that first night, Toby tracked him down. When he relocated 50 miles north of Indianapolis, again Brocker sought him out. And when Matthew needed comfort in dealing with his stricken son, guess who just happened to show up? Another shining example of what CBMC's Life on Life is all about.